Now we're going to go through the part where we take an image that we've created and we turn it into a physical card. The basic components of a card are a card blank, which typically is 4-ply mat board. You can use thinner stuff, but acid-free 4-ply mat board is one of your best choices. A front and back overlay that has the images on it. The glue that you stick all this together with, and amazingly enough, when you really start making cards, the glue is one of the most important and expensive parts of the process. And of course, you have to have the images that you're going to make the card out of. The card blank itself has to be acid-free. Sometimes you'll get some great deals on inexpensive mat boards. Don't ever take anybody up on them because they will ruin your beautiful stereo slides. It needs to be rigid enough to hold up to a reasonable amount of handling. So anything less than 4-ply is usually too flimsy. And you ought to, excuse me.
How about the cards from QL? Are you familiar with those?
The Q-mount cards?
Yeah.
That's actually a different way of making cards. Those are the fold-over cards.
Yeah.
That's actually a completely different way of making cards than the way that I'm doing here. So they're nice mounts, and I've used them for some of the stuff I've done. But this is as I said, it's a completely different technique, so I can't really compare them. You need a piece that's cut between 1 and 2 inches larger in both dimensions than your finished card is going to be for the process that I'm using. The front and back overlay needs to be good quality paper if they're going to be inkjet prints. And if you're going to print on these, they need to be really high quality inkjet paper. Thick enough to work with and with a nice touch when you handle it. Of course, if it's going to be a photograph, you already know what the paper is going to look like. It's going to be a photo print. The glue is one of the things you don't really think about when you start making this, and it turns out to be the most important part of the card, and quite often the most expensive part of the card. The choices that most people use are 3M's positionable mounting adhesive, which is a sheet of adhesive that you rub over the surface of an image, and then the glue comes off on the image itself, and then you can press that image down. It basically makes a sticker out of it. It's a pretty good choice. It is a little bit expensive. Spray mount, which I don't understand how anybody ever uses, because you lay a piece of paper down, you take a spray can of glue, and you across it. And when I use it, I end up with a god-awful mess. But I know people who make very lovely cards using spray mount. Dry mount is something that looks a little bit like wax paper. And you put it between the two images. You put it in a heat press, and you heat it up to a predetermined heat, and it fuses the two images together. This is the process that most people use for mounting photographs professionally. Museums and things use it. If you're going to use it at home, you have to have a dry mount press. An iron does not work. I've spent a lot of time trying to make it work.
Also, dry mount adhesive, you have to make sure it's archival. You can get some acid adhesive as well.
There are a lot of dry mount. That's a very good point. There are a lot of dry mount adhesives, and that's true of 3M's PMA is archival. Spray glue mount may or may not be archival. Dry mount may or may not be archival. We only want to use archival quality ingredients. We're putting a lot of work into these. We don't want to save a few pennies. My personal choice is something that was invented originally for children making stickers. It's called a Xyron machine. It's this guy right here. And it's actually a simple form of the 3M PMA. You put your image through the machine, and the machine puts glue on it. It comes out the other end with a nice even layer of glue. Not cheap. The images that we're talking about are normally going to be the 4x7 or APS format photo prints, because they are the right size for gluing down to these cards. And here's what they look like when you get them back from the processor. This is the front of a card from our last APEC group meeting in Portland, and this is the back of the card. So what we're trying to do is show you how to take these and this and turn it into something that looks like an attractive stereo card. It should be a fairly simple procedure. Unfortunately, it is not. Okay, let's go through the tools we're going to use. And I'm going to make a statement right up front. If you're going to make nice stereo cards, you're going to have to invest in a couple of tools. Because if you don't, you're simply not going to have much luck, and you're going to get very frustrated at it. My preferred tools for doing this, the first and most important part is the trimmer. Everything we do about this involves cutting paper and cutting cardboard. This is called a rototrim. It's an English company. It costs about $250 in the size that I'm holding here in my hand. You can buy one for, I think, about $175 that's smaller than this. But this is an almost ideal size for making stereo cards. I wouldn't buy anything larger unless you just need it for something else.
Go to eBay and get it for about 180.
Go to eBay, get them much cheaper. The big characteristic of this printer, this cutter, is it will slice right through 4-ply mat board like it was paper, which is a wonderful thing. Don't buy something that looks like this. There are a lot of other people that make them. Kodak and some other people do, and they mostly have a single rail up here. And you will find that they may cut 1 or 2 stereo cards, but then they're probably going to be about used up. It's not really that big of an investment. And you'd be amazed the things you find to use a good paper trimmer for once you own one. They're just really nice things. The next item is a corner rounder. If you're going to make nicely rounded corners on your cards like this, and you're going to cut through 4-ply mat board, which also has a photograph glued on both sides, you need something that can punch right through it. And this is a Lasco corner rounder. It's not a very large device, but it has a precision steel cut die in here that's changeable. You can change the diameter of the corners that you're making. And it cuts through 4-ply mat board like there's nothing in the cutter. If you really can't afford this, you can go out and buy these little hand punch dies that you find in craft stores. They're usually red plastic or blue plastic. And if you have really strong thumbs, you can make maybe a dozen or 2 dozen cards per corner rounder. And they only cost about $3 or $4. So if you just want to try this, that's someplace where you could skimp on the cost of it a little bit. But I'd go ahead and buy a corner rounder. They're also one of those things that just comes in amazingly useful once you own one for all kinds of things that you make at home. The next item is the Xyron glue machine. And the Xyron glue machine is really a carrier for this glue cartridge that snaps right in here. And this is the Model 900. It is the best size for making stereo cards because you can put 2 stereo cards, the front and the back, in the glue machine at the same time. The cartridges for these glue machines cost about the same thing, whether they're 6 inches wide or 9 inches wide or a foot wide. So if you get one that matches the size of your prints, it's the most economical use of the glue. Now, this machine costs about $70 on the web. In a craft store, I've seen them priced anywhere up to about $150. So when you go to craft stores, you want to be very careful where you're shopping. You spend a lot of money on them. And also, this happens to be the low end of the nice versions of this machine. It's made very well.
What do the glue cartridges cost?
The glue cartridges cost anywhere from $39 to $22.
We usually can buy them by
20 to $22 each, and they're 40 feet long.
But if you just go to like Joann's, it'll be $39.
It'll be $39. So you want to shop for them. You can buy them for about $22. 40 feet long, $22, 7-inch card, 50 cents a card.
If you get on Joann's mailing list, when they have sales, or basically once a month, you'll get a 40% off one item at their store. So that reduces it to a
I'm
reason.
going to pull this cartridge out and show you what it looks like, even though every instinct says not to, because I'm about to use it in a presentation. What's very nice about it is it puts a backing on the card, and it puts a clear protective overlay on the front of it. So after you've run it through, you've got glue on the card, a backing that protects the glue, and something to protect the front of the card.
And once you get your card machine, you can also make
So
laminate things.
And
it laminates the front of the card?
No. The thing that's on the front of the card is a temporary covering. It comes right off.
Oh, okay.
You can buy cartridges that laminate the card, but I wouldn't. They look lousy if you're going to use them for stereo cards. But this is another one of those tools that once you get it, you're going to use it to laminate driver's license. It's a generic tool. You can do almost anything.
How to put together your hang glider.
Yeah, how to put together your hang glider. The one thing you cannot buy that is also an essential tool to doing this is an alignment frame. Now, I'm an old bookbinder person, and I'm very used to the concept that you make your tools. When I was at a talk on this same subject given by Georgette Foreman, I guess these days, he was using an alignment frame. And I go, these things have been around in bookbinding forever, but they're a necessary part of putting these cards together. They let you line up 2 pieces of paper and glue them uniformly across each other without any problems. In the back of the handout we gave is a simple set of instructions for making one of these alignment frames. And as you can see, all it is a good quality yardstick that I've cut a couple of pieces out of, and a piece of 1/4-inch plexiglass with a little piece of mylar on the front of it. And this is something you can buy at Michael's or Joann's in the quilting section, by the way. And some felt to protect the back. And I'll show you how this is used. And when we're actually doing the physical demonstration of it, we can talk about how to make one yourself. But if you own a hand drill, you can make one of these in about 15 minutes for maybe $10. Because you can get the people at Lowe's or Home Depot to cut this plastic to the right size for you. They sell it in sheets about 3 times this size. Do not fall for the salesman line. It's easy to cut. Just take it home and do it. It's a nightmare to cut. Make them do it. They will do it for you.
If they get it wrong, they'll do it again.
And if they break it and get it wrong, they will just take another piece out and redo it, whereas you will have to go back and buy another one. Okay. We've actually talked about most of the things about these machines, but the Xyron machine is archival glue. It's a very high quality glue, and it puts an extremely uniform coating on whatever you glue it with. Yes?
Where on the web would you go to find the Xyron's machine?
There's actually a suggested website on the back of here, but if you just search for the word Xyron on the web, you'll get about 1,000 hits because it's sold by almost all craft stores. It's a very popular item. Walmart used to sell them.
Craft Ideas, I think it is.
Yeah.
Has good prices if you buy quantity of wool.
Wilds?
Wild,
Wild.
W-I-L-D-E. Yeah. But search for Xyron 900, you'll find it.
Yeah, you'll find them in all kinds of places. This is a very
Wow.
popular craft item today. It's extremely easy to use, and even though you're going to wince at the cost when you start buying the cartridges, 55 to 75 cents a card for glue is actually a reasonable price to pay for a high-quality
You
glue.
pay that much for the PMA.
You pay that much for the PMA. I started out using PMA, and I found it very hard to use myself, and moved on to the Xyron machine. The steps we're going to go through in making a card. First, we're going to glue up the images. We're going to put the glue on the back of the images. Then we're going to paste them to our piece of backing board, cut the card out of the board, and round the corners on the card. That's all there is to it. In order to do this, the first thing you do is you take the Xyron machine and you put the 2 pieces of the images physically in the machine and turn the crank until it comes through the other side. I know this is sounding a little simplistic, but this is the way this thing works. If you're making more than one set, this has a nice little cutter on the back to cut the glue off. You just keep going to save glue. You let the images be close together to each other. You can save some glue. And the other thing you want to do is always put both the back and the front in at the same time. Can anyone guess why? Because otherwise you will burn one of these and you'll have 2 extra backs and 2 extra fronts. If you mess them up doing it this way, because the one thing about the Xyron machine I do not like, there's no way to tell when the glue's running out. You find that out when suddenly the handle turns freer than it should, and you have a half-glued card. And my advice on those is throw them away. Trying to put glue on them again does not work. When they come out of the Xyron machine, they're on a piece of backing, and we have to cut them out of the backing, and it looks something like this. This is just a single image, but you can see there's a waxy paper on the back and a clear film on the front, and our image is embedded in the middle of it. Now, technically, you don't have to trim the images out to use them. You can just pull them off. But when you do that, there are going to be little bits of glue on the corners of these images, which is a big problem with the PMA when I try to use it. And that little bits of glue will inevitably wind up on the front of the card, okay? If you trim them out, you get away from that problem. We're going to trim them out by simply setting these guys down on a cutting mat and using a nice sharp X-Acto knife. And when you use an X-Acto knife, this is your old-fashioned number 11 that's used by every craft person in the world, go out and buy a box of 100 blades. They're quite inexpensive, and every time you start to make more than about 10 cards, take the blade out and throw it away and put a brand new blade in. Blades are cheap, cards are expensive.
Why don't you use the rototrim?
Because it's very, very hard to line these things up and cut them out in the roto trimmer without messing up the card blank. There's nothing to line it up with. I have occasionally, when I make inkjet prints and I've printed something bigger than the card, because remember these are 4x7 and we don't want to cut any of the ends of this off. I actually will make them larger than this and put cut lines on, and then I'll use the trimmer to do it. but most of the time I'm using photos, and I don't have any guidelines to cut the ends of them off. Oh, by the way, a pack of 100 blades costs about the same thing as buying 10 single blades, or 2 small 5-blade packs. So it's really very easy to do, that whenever people see me doing this, they start cringing. Because what you do is you let the edge of the paper guide the blade. Instead of you trying to guide it, you let the edge of the paper guide the blade, and you can cut right around all 4 sides of one of these cards. Light, smooth motions. Then you can simply peel this backing away, and what you've got left are the front and back of the card, nicely not permanently laminated, clear on the front and glue on the back. Then we take our alignment frame, and if I haven't used it in a while, I always grab my carpenter square, my drafting square, and check to make sure it's aligned correctly, because sometimes these screws will let this thing move a little bit. And if it's an all out, it'll throw your card off. If it's okay, then we're going to use the alignment frame. A little question here, and it's a trick question. The question is, how do you glue a glued up piece of paper to a piece of board and get it on perfectly flat and smooth? The answer is you do not. What you do is you take a piece of paper with glue on it and you put a piece of board down on top of it. Then it becomes quite easy to do it. This is an old bookbinding thing. You never try to glue a sheet of glued paper to anything. You glue something else to it. And we'll go through that procedure. In practice, we take one of these glued up images that we've made and we peel this backing off. And so what we did is we turned it into a giant sticker when we made it. It works very well. And we start at the upper left-hand corner of the image and we pull it to the right. And we do that because it tends to curl a little bit when you pull the backing off. And you want it to curl in a direction that holds it down on the paper instead of making the ends lift up off the paper. Now this is permanent adhesive, by the way, and you're seeing me hold it with my fingers. You're saying, okay, what's going on here? It is permanent adhesive, but it's kind of an interesting glue. If you very lightly touch it, it's not very sticky. If you press down on it at all, it becomes very sticky very quick. So you can hold it by the edges without any problem. Notice this sheet of paper on the alignment frame. The great enemy of all projects that involve glue is stray bits of glue. So what I do is I cut up a bunch of scrap paper. These are leftover registration forms from one of the conventions that we helped work on, Charleston, I think. And I keep it around. And when I go to start the gluing project, first I put the scrap paper down, and then I work on top of this. And depending on how messy I'm being, I will throw away the sheet of paper every time that I glue something. I may use it for 2 or 3 times. But we want it to catch the glue, not anything else. And we're going to place the image face down on the paper. We want to make sure it's turned correctly. If it's not turned right, we're kind of out of luck. And we're going to hold it in place against the edges of these guidelines by taking one finger and doing this, just catching the edge and pulling lightly. And if you do that, you can pull this piece of paper into perfect alignment against these 2 sides. If you tried to force it by pushing it from the corners or something, you'd never get it to do that because it'll stand up. But if you take one finger and you just lightly pull on it, it'll pull perfectly into position. Then we're going to take the piece of cardboard. So we're holding this guy with one finger on the corner. And we're going to take a piece of cardboard. And notice we said yardstick because it has to be thicker than a normal ruler. And we're going to take the card in at the edge like this, bring it down, and let that edge catch, and push it down like that. That's how you glue a sheet of paper uniformly across a piece of cardboard. This is just as easy as it looks when I did it just then. And what you need to do, though, before you try this, is go through maybe 10 or 15 iterations with a blank sheet of paper and a piece of cardboard of holding it in position and gently sliding it in place and then pushing it down. Because once you start pushing it down, the adhesive catches and you can make no corrections. You have to do it as a single smooth motion. It sounds a little difficult. It's not. It's very easy. You just want to test it a few times. You know, you're holding that down, you put the cardboard in where it's nicely against that edge, but you notice we're not pressing it down at all. And then you lower it gently down, and you've got it. And yes, you're going to burn maybe 10% of the first 20 cards you make. You're going to burn a few cards, but then you're going to discover you can make hundreds of these, and you won't mess any of them up in this step.
In this.
in this step.
In this step.
Okay, so we lowered the card very gently down onto the adhesive, and then practice it. Practice it with plain paper, practice it without taking the adhesive backing off, practice it until it's a natural motion to you. Once you've got it down, press it firmly on the corners, and if your fingers aren't real strong, buy one of those little 2-inch wooden rollers they sell in craft stores, and then roll it across the back to make sure you've got the image secured properly. It doesn't take much pressure with the Xyron machine, and it will snap tight and hold it very well. So what we've come off with is a piece of cardboard with this image glued in one corner, nicely lined up at the top and bottom edges. At this point, we want to check for stray glue. At every stage in making this card, we want to stop and look at the card and look at our tools and see have we got glue on something. Because if we have, we're going to mess up this card, and what we want to do is stop right then and clean it up. Or if we've already messed up this card because we actually got a little crooked or something, we want to throw it away and start on another one. What we don't want to do is finish making a card we're going to end up throwing away anyway. Then we'll turn the frame to one side because we glued this side of it to make it easy to work with. And we'll slide it in, the paper in like that. And we're going to go through the same process. Who knows why there's a big gap here between the two rulers? Who knows why there's a big gap? What's the answer? Actually, it works for the thumb, but that's not why. The reason there's a big gap here is nothing that you cut a corner on is ever perfectly square. So if you have a gap, if this were perfectly square and you put this corner in, it would tend to hold the paper a little bit to one side or the other side. Since we've got about a 1/2 inch gap in here, there's room for it to pull in and pull flat regardless of what shape this corner actually is. It's a very minor detail, but if you made this frame without this gap, you discover this process doesn't work. This is another old bookbinding thing. We always want to do both sides of the card, by the way. There's a temptation to do all of one side and then do all of the other side. And the reason you want to do the cards all at once is in case you're messing something up, you don't make the same mistake 25 times and then come back and make the other 25 APEC cards and discover you have to throw them all away and start over, which has happened to me. The first thing to do is to make sure you're putting the back turned correctly down. You look at it to make sure that when you lay it down, it's going to turn in the right direction. And then we're going to go through exactly the same procedure, lowering it down, getting it neatly into the corner, holding it with just the tip of one finger against the adhesive and pulling it lightly into the corner of the mounting frame. And then placing the card down on top of it the same way we did before. So we're just repeating the exact same motions. This time we have to be a little more careful. We don't want to put a lot of pressure on that print. You especially don't want to use the wooden roller on it because you will mark the print if you do that. This glue is really good. If you just press down lightly on the corners and run your fingers across it lightly, it'll bond very, very well to the back of the card. I want the front of the card bonded especially well, because if the back of the card has a little flaking in it, a little waving in it or something, it doesn't show up in the hand viewer when you're looking at it. If the front of the card has any kind of little air pockets in it, they stand out like a sore thumb. You want to do several cards at once. This is one of those things where your body, your hands, and your eyes kind of get coordinated. So you want to save up until you're going to do like 10 cards or 6 cards, and you want to do those. But if you start making mistakes, if you discover that you're not getting them pressed down right, you're not lining up right, call it quits. Put all this stuff aside. You've had too much caffeine that day, you're a little too tired or something, and you just really don't want to do it. And when you finish a card, check it at every stage, check it as you make it, and make sure you're making them correctly. The final stage is the simple process of cutting them out of the backing. It's a simple process, but you're definitely going to get your arm workout when you start cutting through this mat board this way. And what we're going to do there is use the trimmer tool. If you don't have a trimmer tool and you want to make just a few cards, put a brand new knife, a brand new blade in the X-Acto knife, and buy a good steel ruler, not a plastic ruler with a little steel edge, but a good thick steel ruler. Press it down or clamp it down on the card, and then cut it with about 100 cuts, making really light cuts like this. And when I say 100, I'm not doing that for exaggeration. It's going to be somewhere between 50 and 100 that it takes to go through the 4-ply mat board and end up with a good edge. You can do it. It's very tedious and very slow. A little note about using this trimmer, and it's one that a lot of people get wrong. Only cut by pulling the blade toward you. The blade cuts in both directions, but the way it's designed, and it's true of most trimmers, it cuts best when it's pulled toward what's called the fence. And the fence, in paper cutter terms, is this edge down here. And the people who designed this trimmer made the assumption that when you cut something here, you were going to line it up with that and then pull this blade down across it. The other reason you only want to cut in one direction is when you push back, the force on the blade changes a little bit, and it may make the edge a little bit rough. And remember, what we're trying to make here are beautiful cards that are really well precision made. The other thing is, don't ever push the blade back with something you've cut already in the trimmer. When you put the thing in the trimmer and you pull the blade across it, take the thing you cut out, then push the blade back. If you push the blade back, it will inevitably take little nicks out of the edge of the thing you just cut. Since this is a tiring thing to do, you want to take your time doing it, and if you find yourself getting tired, just stop and put it aside before you start learning cards. The final step is to take a corner rounder, just put the cards in and go around rounding the corners on them. This is the easiest part of the whole process. I mean, you won't believe how easy it is to cut through 4-ply cardstock with one of these Lasso corner rounders. If you really have to buy one of the small ones, that's okay, but you're going to put a lot of energy in it. It's not going to look quite as nice. And if you don't want to use rounded corners, that's okay too, but I think you'll be amazed at the difference it makes in the aesthetic appeal of your card when you round the corners on it. Once you've got all 4 corners rounded, we strip off that protective film that the Xyron machine put on. We've left on this whole time, and it's been protecting the card from fingerprints and all of this stuff which mess cards up. Look it over to see if there's any glue on it or misalignment problems. Clean off the dust and then place it in the card sleeve. And we've created a fairly high quality card, and in a very simple process actually. I mean, if you actually set up and do this, you're going to be amazed how easy it is to make cards that look really nice. So we finished our card here. One thing that I used to get upset with when I do this is I do tend to burn a few cards, and you're going to do that. It's inevitable. With all the steps and processes involved, you're going to mess up some percentage of them. You just have to not let that bother you. And the first few times you do this, it's going to be cumbersome, and you might want to actually write out the steps to make sure you don't skip any. But after you've done a few of them, it'll get really easy to do, and you'll find it's super easy to make cards. Now, Bill Mull told this story at our Miami meeting the other day, but I was giving the How to Make Cards presentation at our 3D Fest in Atlanta, and we had this little kid there who was about 6 or 7 years old, and he was fascinated with 3D. He was looking at every exhibit. People were picking him up so he could see the cards that were too high for him to see it. And when I was going through this process of making cards, and I did it by just making them, we didn't have the projector and everything, I got about halfway, 2/3 of the way through the procedure. He said, yeah, is this supposed to be fun? And it was so innocently done. So I'm thinking, well, yeah, it is supposed to be fun. I kind of see where you might get the wrong impression about it. But it is supposed to be fun, and it actually is fun. Okay,
or you
well.
can use my thing and have the 2 and you just say, here.
Oh yeah, Suzanne has a completely different technique. She hands me the 2 images and gets a card back, but it won't work for anybody else. Okay, it's going to take me about a minute to take the slide projector down, and then we're going to go through all of the steps of making a card here on the table. Okay. This is the part where as many people as want to actually watch me do this,
And try to gather
try
around
to
the
get
table.
close enough around the table to see what's going on.
Just leave room for the camera, though, so others can see
Please do
it.
not mark. Dennis is doing a DVD of this, so please do not block out his ability to see it.
How did they do it in the old days when they used to sell a lot of the old cards, the vintage cards, like the printing process, and they wrote those to the top of the machine and did it all at once? Or
Believe it or not, in the old days they had people there, mostly women, making what we would call greatly sub-minimum wage, taking those little chips, gluing them, cutting them out, and pasting them down to cards. It was almost completely a manual process. labor was incredibly cheap.
Don't forget, you don't have to do any of this if you go with the DSEC format.
If you go with
The digital
the
format.
digital format, you don't have to do any of this stuff. I have
There's,
lots. Okay, here we
there's
go.
old stereo cards showing their factory where the women are sitting there, all these women at these desks working on these little cards.
Okay, here are our photo prints, and you can see from the back, they're simply Kodak photo paper prints in the APS format. And we're going to take these guys and line them up. Correct. And you can create this either in Photoshop or something like Microsoft Publisher, Corel Draw, InDesign, whatever's convenient, because there's no precision alignment on it. You notice we have cut lines on the front of this to show us where to cut it. We don't have any on the back of this print. That's so if they don't line up exactly, nothing bad happens and nobody knows we missed. So we put these in and always do a front and a back at the same time. And you just run it through the machine. And cut it off, okay? Now, if you're making a bunch of these, you notice we wasted like an inch of glue. I don't know about you guys, I'm really cheap. If you're making a bunch of these, what you do is you don't cut them off. You just lean over the front of this guy and you watch for when it just comes out of the roller and you put your next couple of prints in. And then you only end up with about that much space between them and you can go on. In practice, we'd make a whole bunch of those. And now I need a chair because I keep doing this next part sitting down.
Now, this process is only added adhesive to the back, right?
Correct.
And that-
And
Or is there a
front
front
has-
on there too?
There's a
There's
front on
front
there.
too.
There's a clear plastic front.
Oh.
Can you guys see the clear
Is that a
plastic
release
overlay?
or is that going to be a laminate?
No, this comes off.
Oh, all
This is a
right.
protective feature. This is one reason I really love the Xyron machine. It protects the front of your image while you're working with it from there on. Now, this is the step that everybody winces at, and I don't know why, because it's really easy to do after you practice it once or twice.
Getting a straight
Okay?
line is an issue.
You take the knife and you put it right along the edge of the print, and you just smoothly glide it down like that. And what you're doing is letting the print itself, guide the knife point.
Use this
And
pretty
whenever
good.
I go in
Now.
the room to watch
You
him,
use
he
that
always
same
messes
silver-
it up, so.
Same metal ruler to do that?
It doesn't work.
Okay.
It's almost impossible to line a metal ruler. This is not hard to do, guys.
Okay.
If you practice it 4 or 5 times on some junk prints, the prints cost 12 cents or 20 cents each or something, print off a few extra ones, glue them up and practice it like
I
I'm
got it
doing
down
here.
after like my first 2 cuts.
Yeah, she did.
I had a comment about those blades. I do a lot of modeling and cut wood with them. You can get longer life out of those blades if you've got like a belt sander or something, because only the very tip's being used, and you just do a little edge grind on it, and you can use that blade 3 times and do
That's
3
right.
grinds on it.
We are just using the very tip of the blade, and what I actually do at home is I recycle these into other X-Acto knives that I'm using for rougher jobs. Because this is the thing where you want to start out with a new blade every time you do it. So I'm just going around these cards on all the edges. And notice I'm doing this with 20 people watching me, and it's still working, so it can't be that hard.
You've done it a few thousand times.
Then you hold it down.
But if you drink too much Coke, that's a different story.
And you pull it off. And depending on the humidity, this plastic either sticks really well to the front or it's a little bit loose. But see, we've got it glued on the back, and if I pull this back, you can see the clear plastic overlay on the back of it.
Static.
Yeah, and it cleans, but it's a static clean deal, and it holds together. And we've got the back and front of our cards. And that's the step that everybody winces at, and if I can do it when I've had 5 Cokes and I've got a bunch of people watching me, it cannot be that tough, okay? Next we come to the alignment frame. We start out with a clean piece of paper, and we'll put it in the corner here. The reason this Mylar is on the alignment frame, by the way, is the glue does not stick to it. So if you do get some glue on it, it makes it easy to clean it up. The reason it's translucent Mylar is I can put this on my light table and use it to do all kind of alignment of other projects. I like to make tools do multiple jobs. So we're going to take one of these blanks, and when I cut these out, I know you're not going to be able to see this, there's a little tiny pencil mark right there. When I cut these out, because I go to my sister's frame shop, and they get us this mat board in long strips, but they cut it short enough that I can cut it in this trimmer. When I cut it out, I left a little mark on it so I know which corner is actually square, that I've cut to be square. And then I'm going to take the front of the card, keeping the adhesive intact, and take my thumbnail, and this is the part that maybe, yeah, here we go, and peel off the backing paper, okay? And we'll lay it down. And see how I'm pulling it in with my finger? You know, it's just a super light touch, but it pulls it very snugly into the two pieces of ruler. Then I take this guy, and I lower it down and push my finger out of the way with it, and drop it in place.
What's the size of those cards when you have them cut like that?
I make them an inch larger than my finished card. So if it's going to be a photo print, this is 4 by 7, then I want 8 by 5.
So they're
cards.
cutting scraps for you? Is that what they're doing?
My sister runs a commercial framing shop
she does.
that goes through, they throw away tons
Oh, I know.
of mat board every month. And if you can find a place like that, they'll just give it to you. It's odd shapes and
Yeah,
sizes,
if
but
you
it's
cut it.
perfect for us, and then we cut it. If you go to a craft store and buy it, they'll usually make 1 or 2 cuts for free on it.
Yeah.
So just get it cut down to whatever size you can handle in your trimmer and do the rest of the cuts yourself. So we turn the frame around, we pick this guy up, and we keep the clear plastic on, keep the fingerprints on. And you can see we've glued that very neatly, no picture standing on the edges of it, all the way around, and it's perfectly flat. Now if you tried to do that by laying this card down and then doing this, it will not happen. It certainly won't happen more than once or twice. Take the piece of paper and either throw it away, or if it's still perfectly clean, we'll put it back down in the corner. If you see any trace of glue on it, throw it away, because one little bit of glue and you just burnt this beautiful card we've been working on.
Good source of that scrap paper is all those faxes you get you don't want.
All those faxes, all those things that I print,
We print off a LaserJet and then we find out we spelled something wrong.
the
Stack
manuscript
it.
for my book that's best suited for scrap paper, and things like that. Okay. Now we take the back, make sure we're turning it upright. It does no good if it's upside down. And we'll do the same thing. We're just going to lightly pull it in until we've got it snug against the corners here. Take the front of the card and do the same thing we did with the back. We're just going to very lightly push it against the end and then push it down. This time I don't want to mess the front up, so I'm being careful not to put pressure over the actual image area. Lift it up, and we've got a laminated card. Okay? Image on the front, image on the back. Let's take this guy out of the way. And now I want to show you a trick about the roto trim that'll make a big difference in making cards. Hand me my little piece of ruler. If I put this in and I line it up and I run this trimmer down here and cut it, I cannot take this card out because the head is going to be on top of the card. It's going to be very hard to move it back out. So what I'm going to do is take a nice flat piece of hardwood. It has nice smooth edges.
Wider than the blade.
That's wider than the blade, and I'm going to put it against the fence down here. And now I can take this card. I'm being a little bit clumsy here today. I've had a lot of Coca-Colas. And I'm going to line it up. Because what I want to do is just take the tiniest little edge off this print, like a 32nd of an inch is all I want to take off.
Usually do that standing.
I usually do this standing up. I have a bench at home that's just about the right height. See, we've made a really nice cut, and if you put your fingers on it, there's no glue, because the blade cut the glue part off. And you can see we've taken just a tiny little cut of the print away, as small a cut as I can, and make sure that I actually get it completely cut away.
Sticking to that blade and clean the blade off once in a while.
And that really isn't a problem. I mean, the Xyron machine, you have to clean the rollers in it occasionally. Now we're going to do the same thing to this end of the card, because we want the card to be perfectly smooth, and it never is when you stick these two pieces of paper down. And again, we're going to use the smallest space we can get away with, and we're going to cut through it. With this piece of wood in place, I can just pull this away without any trouble at all. See, that's the size we cut off of it. It's very, very small, but it leaves this really pretty edge to the card. We built these guidelines in when we made the card, remember, in Photoshop. So now we're going to take the card and line the guidelines up. And we're going to take a look to see if they line up at the top and bottom. Well, you know, when we were doing this at one point, we actually had a little TV camera pointed down at it so we could watch, show people what we were doing. But I don't want to break my glasses. cut that off. And the white cutoff line is on here. It's a hairline away from where I cut. I want to cut just inside it. Now, even if I'm trying to make a 3.5-inch high card, it doesn't hurt to make it a smidging shorter than 3.5 inch. It means it fits the viewers better and it fits the envelopes better.
You can get it in the store.
We're just going to turn this guy around, line it up in the corners, make the same cut. And again, we cut it to where I don't think you can really see this, but that white line has just like a 1 pixel thickness of blue between it and the cut.
When you get going, how many prints an hour can you make?
What's the answer to that, Suzanne? I don't pay attention.
Since he does them in sections, it's not how many per hour. He'll spend 1 hour doing the blue. Then he'll spend another hour doing the cutting, that kind of stuff.
I can do 25 cards in an afternoon. I do it at least 4 times a year for the APEC card exchange because I always end up doing them at the last minute. Just like everybody else.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Now here's the corner rander. I mean, that is not a bad looking card, right? It's not bad, but it's got the corners on it and they never cut exactly flush, no matter how sharp the blade is, no matter how good you do that. So you pop this guy in the corner rounder. Look at that, 4-ply board, and it's like there was nothing in it.
You're keeping the covering on.
And
to
we're
not
keeping
have
the
to worry
covering
about
on, the
fingerprints.
back and the front, so we can just handle these things freely without worrying about getting fingerprints on them. Okay? Take the plastic off, back and front.
Goes on eBay.
The last step was coloring the edge with a blue felt tip.
You think you're kidding. I make 2 kinds of cards, and I will be honest about this. I make cards like this that I'm going to produce multiple of, 25 or 30. And then I make cards like this one, which have individual chips that have been rounded. Now I create these in the computer too, and I make them exactly the way we did this, but I use a different style alignment frame to put the chips down. I do everything in the computer, and I end up with something that looks like this. You see, it's the 2 card edges, but it has cut lines on the top and bottom of the chips to show me how to trim it out in the Rototrim trimmer, so I can cut these out. And then I go through exactly the same process here, and I bond a sheet of paper that has a good feel to it to the front of the card and a sheet of paper to the back of the card instead of photo prints. And then I use this alignment frame, which, as you can see, this has a little ruler with crosshairs on it. It's a very common thing you can find in a drafting store or in Michael's carries them. And I can slide it up and down to set the height I want the chips to be. I can move this ruler by adjusting this like this. I can move it down to the correct height for the chip. And line it up. Move it down to here. Okay. And now when I go to put these chips on, I don't have to make precision alignments because I just have to snug them up against this plastic ruler. So you can use this technique we were just using to make a quote-unquote traditional old-fashioned card, do a really spiffy job of it actually. But the real point behind it is to make these cards that are quick and easy to make and inexpensive. And I can do 25 of these in an afternoon. I can actually only do about 2 of these an hour. So even with all the stuff I've designed and done to make it easy, if I actually get them right, I can only do about 2 an hour. Because there are things like, I don't like the chip edges showing white when you're glued down. So I take a pen, an artist pen, and I go around and I color the edges of these chips black before I glue them down to the board. And then I make the edge of the card match the paper by using this assortment of colored pencils, those boxes of 5,000 colored pencils. And I pick one that I can go across the edges of the card and then burnish it off. So you're looking at something that takes conservatively half an hour to an hour to make versus something that when you get rolling, you can make one about every 5 or 10 minutes and make it very easily. Okay, that's the procedure. What did people have that I didn't explain very clearly or whatever about this that I can help with?
Is there a WAV file on your website?
This presentation will be up on our website in about 2 weeks. The PowerPoint part of it with the photos and things will be up on our website, and the handouts will be up on the website. The back of the handout has instructions for making that alignment frame. That's the one piece of equipment you have to have, and you have to make it yourself.
How do you glue this one down?
I do this.
Individual chips.
These are individual chips. See, here's an example of what they start out looking like. That's how it came back from the photo printer. Sorry, I dropped it. And I will take these, and they have cut lines to show me how to cut them so I don't mess the stereo window up. Slip them into the roto trim and cut these two chips out. Then I use this different alignment frame to actually glue them down. And of course, I corner around the chips themselves before I put them down because I think that looks nice.
Different corner around it,
Different size. I use the 1/8" die. That's one of the nice things about the Lasco corner rounder. The reason I would invest in one, if you can afford to, is they make about 4 or 5 dies for it. And all you have to do is lift the lever up, pull it out, and push the die in, and you can make from 1/8" to 1/2"
May we
corners.
circulate that sample card?
Oh, absolutely.
That blue
Then
one?
how did you glue it down?
Yeah.
Glue which down?
That one in your
What do you
hand?
recommend
That one
in
in the
general
hand.
for
You first
the
did
corner
exactly
dies
the same
around
as we
it?
did with the
Quarter
paper.
inch and more
Then
I think,
for the
I think 1/4" looks really nice. If you get beyond that, I think it starts to be bulky. And less than that, you don't
With
want
the blue one.
The 1/4" seems to be a really good compromise.